Jewish Agency for Israel. Amira, you are joined here by representatives of MERCAZ Olami from the US, from Canada, Israel, of course, Mexico, Hungary, Uruguay, Australia, Argentina, and if I'm not mistaken, here also from Colombia, Chile, and Germany. Frank will not be here with us tonight unless I'll be surprised. MERCAZ Olami is the political arm of the conservative movement, conservative Masorti movement in the national institutions. And we are quite active in the WZO. And from time to time, we host leaders from one of the daughters of the WZO, from KKL and from Keren HaYesod, and this time from the Jewish Agency. And we are so thrilled that it's you from the Jewish Agency, A, because we know and appreciate you so much, and B, because you are the first woman to lead the Jewish Agency professionally, and knowing you for so many years and even working for you for quite a few years, I'm so happy that you are the one to lead the significant changes that the Jewish Agency is going these days. We just concluded a few days of the Board of Governors, and it was fascinating to see the new strategic paths that are now in place. And we would love to hear you and to get an update from the Jewish Agency today to see where are we going in our youngest daughter, but probably the most important one. So, Amira, bevakasha.
So, shalom and erev tov, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Each of us is in a different corner of the world. I want to start by really thanking for the opportunity, thanking my good friend, I would say a long years friend Izhar, who is now on this very senior leadership position in the WZO, and so a great partner of ours. But also thanking for the opportunity to meet all of you. I should say that, you know, we're concluding, and it is unbelievable. We're concluding a year. I mean, I go back a year and think about, you know, between Purim to Pesach last year, who would have imagined that this craziness would continue to be with us a year after? And what mostly it did for us, I'll share a bit later on, but I think it kind of forced us to at least physically be apart. And so I did not have the opportunity to be in the field. But I do want to say that when normalcy was out there, one of the things that I'm most inspired by as part of my job, not only as the CEO, but also in many previous years I've worked for this organization, is the ability to go out there to visit communities and to see the amazing, flourishing, thriving Jewish scene in communities abroad, which you are true leaders of, and bring inspiration and opportunity to have such community life in the different communities you come from. And I had the opportunity along the years to visit many conservative movements all across, whether it's in Budapest, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in the US, other European countries, as well as in Israel. I should say on a personal level, I'm part of a very special community in Mazgiret Batya, a small town in Israel, which is a mixed community between religious and non-religious, where we share a vision of pluralistic view on Jewish life that is inspired by the heritage and by the Jewish values, along with a joint educational systems, which I sent my kids to this system in a very proud way. And my son was just bar mitzvah this year by our local conservative rabbi. And so I have huge appreciation, both on a personal level, to the work all of you do to enable such an opportunity of Jewish life for hundreds of thousands of Jews in Israel and across the world. Moving into the organization and where is it that we're at, I'll share a few slides just in order to kind of capture some highlights, but mostly I would hope that we would leave time for questions and have a discussion more than a presentation. So I'll start by saying that I assume many of you, this is not the first time of you meeting or hearing about the Jewish Agency, but I always like to start with this slide that kind of reminds us. We're saying, Da me'ayin bata u'le'an ata olech, we're saying in Hebrew, right? Where you came from and where is it towards you're going, you're dreaming. And so when we think about the Jewish Agency for Israel, we go back 90 years, or actually 120 years, to the first Zionist Congress, and then to the birth of the Zionist Dream, the WZO, as the organization, as the mother organization, which 90 years ago created the Jewish Agency for Israel, which was created in order to be the execution arm on behalf of the Zionist movement to carry out the dream, to fulfill the dream of forming as a sovereign Jewish state. And Ben-Gurion not only being a leader of that movement and then becoming the first prime minister of Israel, but also was the first chairman of the Jewish Agency as he moved into becoming the first prime minister. And so when we think about who we are as an organization, so we see the Jewish Agency as representing the Jews from all over the world, all kind of Jews from all over the world, and being kind of the global platform to address on behalf of world Jewry the most important issues of our time. And those issues may vary over time, but what doesn't change is we are the only organization in the world that is actually governed by, owned by all the segments of the Jewish world as part of our organization. And so we have a global footprint, and we work in 66 countries. Actually, it was 65 until recently with the blessing of the Abraham Accords. We have recently opened a new location. We're located in the United Arab Emirates, and hopefully working even broader in the Gulf area. So now we're in 66 countries. And we see ourselves as kind of the living bridge between world Jews and Israelis, and Israel as a country, Israel as a society, Israel as a Zionist idea, and Israelis. At the same time, we hold a very special covenant with the government of Israel, along with the World Zionist Organization, that gives us a special status to work on behalf of the government. And we have some mandates in different areas. Aliyah is an example. We'll talk about it a bit later. And we are out there in the field working with communities to help them address any crisis that arises. That even before the pandemic, in different periods of our history, as well as in the last year, which was a great example of what does it mean to be a first responder in times of crisis. And lastly, the Jewish people, which was the one to mobilize the ability to carry out the Zionist dream and form the state of Israel. We continue to bring the voice of the Jewish people to influence the nature of the Israeli society, whether it's in areas of pluralism and law and religion issues, whether it's in areas of equality and influencing about the different segments of the Israeli society. When we talk about the Jewish world today, we're talking about 14.7 million Jews defined by the Halacha, and about 24 million Jews in a more broader definition that are eligible for the law of return, which reside in kind of 6 geographies currently. Israel being the biggest one, North America being the second one, kind of in the same area of 6-point-something million Jews. And then former Soviet Union, Europe, Latin America, and South Africa and Australia being the 6. I'm mentioning that because when we work in those 66 countries and we want to make sure that we're attending the needs of Jews all across the world, we understand that they live under different realms. So the realm in Latin America is a very different one than the one in former Soviet Union, as well as with relation to France or UK and in Europe. And that is built from different elements. So the history of the communities, the nature of the structure of the community, the different Jewish opportunities in every community, the geopolitical situation, the economic situation, all of those contribute to the fact that Jewish life looks differently, but in many ways share a lot of similarities. And so the ability of ours to work all across the world and make sure that we create a global connection between communities and a learning between communities is a very critical part of what we do. When we think about the Jewish world today, we're seeing kind of 5 major challenges towards which we're trying to contribute. As you can see on the list, none of them would probably be strange to you. I'm sure every Jewish community relate to those in some extent. And also, I should say, none of these challenges are ones that I think any organization could claim to own the solution to. They're not on a scale of solving or non-solving, but more of, how could we make progress in being in a better spot than we are today? So thinking about the fragmentation within the Jewish world, the different tension and controversial between different segments of the Jewish people, which is something that brings a lot of concern to us, and trying to strive for more of a shalom bayit in many ways. At the same time, growing alienation from Israel in some parts of the Jewish world, more so in the younger generation, I would say, in some of among some of the progressive parts of the Jewish world, feeling discomfort and I would say less of a unconditional loyalty as was before, and that as well is a great concern of ours. And there's a lot of work to do there in order to be able to influence, to make Israel as a relevant core piece of the Jewish identity of Jews all across the world. We acknowledge the fact that there are generational changes that change kind of the how the younger generation perceives leadership and their role in the world. And even their, I would say, their attitude towards establishments and structures. And so the environment in which we work is a very different one. And when we think about leadership in the Jewish world within a generation's time from now, it's probably going to look very different. And we take that into consideration. Anti-Semitism and anti-Zionist sentiments, which are on a rise, unfortunately, in the last decade or so, and are very concerning to us, both in the frequency and how often they take place, as well as how wide they're spread geographically, as well as the extent of the threats, and some of them really becoming life-threatening and in some cases very unfortunate results in terms of casualties and people wounded. And lastly, I would say change in communal structures. We live in an era where when we look at some of the Jewish communities and we ask ourselves, what's going to be in a generation's time, that is a question. Some communities under risk, like Venezuela or Turkey, or Ethiopia in that sense. Some communities that are actually growing. We know about the phenomena of some emerging new communities of people who want to join the Jewish people. And so all of that creates a situation where the landscape is one that is going under changes and creates for us different policy considerations. And lastly, I would say the issue of the COVID. We're post a year where we've had to address many very critical emergency needs among many of our beneficiaries and populations. But what we're mainly looking at is, what would recovery period look like? And in many communities, mainly the smaller ones outside of North America, it seems that recovery period is going to be not a short one and a difficult one, and will entail the need to support and to strengthen those communities and use that global platform of ours as a collective of the Jewish people to be out there to support those communities. The Jewish Agency, after a year of a strategic process, a very thorough and wide one, where we have involved hundreds of leaders and professionals from all across the world in different consultations. Just on the eve of the outbreak of the COVID, the Board of Governors approved the three main impact areas of the Jewish Agency to work around in the next couple of years. Aliyah being the first one, making sure every Jew across the world could come and make Israel his or her home, whether it's an Aliyah of rescue, where we need to rescue and help people migrate to Israel, or whether Aliyah of choice, mobilize, encourage, and help people to make Israel their home and be integrated in Israel. The second area is connecting Jews around the world to Israel and to one another, including making sure the Jews all across in every community they live could live safely and be connected strongly to Israel as a core piece of the Jewish identity. And lastly, the work in the Israeli society, that's our third impact area, which is really to continue to impact the Israeli society through the representation of world Jewry and its involvement in the nature of the Israeli society. But once we have approved that and we're about to move on to translate that into a rolling out of allocation of resources, prioritizing, structure, etc., we woke up to a morning where the world has dramatically changed. And so what has happened to us is we understood that we have to first and foremost care for the populations who are most dependent on us. And what that meant was that we had to provide basic needs for thousands of Olim, which reside in 17 of our absorption centers all across Israel. We had to make sure to protect and provide any assistance to elderly residents of our Amigur subsidiary. We have a subsidiary that resides 7,000 senior citizens, most of which are Holocaust survivors, in 57 old age homes. You can imagine those are the most vulnerable populations which we had to take care of, as well as thousands of youth and families at risk in Israel, which we provide services to in routine. And so all of those populations immediately were the ones where we had to make sure that we are addressing all of their very acute and emergency needs as implications of the pandemic. At the same time, in the fact that we're working in 66 countries with communities through a whole network of hundreds of shlichim, Israeli emissaries who come to do educational work, the work we do with informal education, the youth movements, the different communities on the ground, just like in your own communities and organizations, we had to immediately completely reinvent our educational work and transfer it to be online. And so making sure that even though all the restrictions of staying apart and social distancing, we knew the need and the desire to stay together was even greater. And so we had to make all those changes in order for that to happen. And so what we have learned during that year and kind of now informs our adjusted strategy as we move forward and our priorities in 2021 are the following. The first thing is that the role of the global platform became even more relevant and critical. Many communities, mostly the smaller ones outside of North America, who've gone through a severe crisis due to the pandemic, were out there in the need for support. And so the kind of things we've done are, for example, we've created a loan fund that have allocated interest-free loans to community organizations in the amount of $10 million total to over 80 community organizations in dozens of communities. I should say that what kind of mobilized us to do that is a conversation I can't forget with the president of the Rome community, Ruth Delingo, that has shared with us that the implications of the crisis was such that they faced a situation where they had a real cash issue of being able to pay and provide the very basic services to their community because of the economic crisis that had happened there. And so we've learned from many communities that there is a similar need, and that loan fund had created kind of an immediate support lifeline to many organizations, welfare, education, community organizations. At the same time, we've understood that our shlichim, our network of hundreds of shlichim, which actually became kind of boots on the ground, have been working with communities hand in hand during this emergency, both to mobilize the work of volunteers, as well as hold the hotlines of emergency and move all the educational work to be online so that we're able to continue to address the different basic needs of education of the communities. At the same time, we've learned that there is many learning that could be done between communities. And so we have created a resource center, a digital resource center that is called JReady, that is now offering different communities, dozens of communities across the world, to share expertise and knowledge and best models of how to address the different implications of COVID and strengthen community resilience. So how to open different institutions under pandemic, how to have technological tools to help mobilize volunteers, distribute food packages, etc. there is a whole, I would say now, a global network that creates the opportunity to get expertise on a one-to-one basis or webinars or best practices from all across the world and Israel to help those communities address the situation, as well as our security fund that continue to allocate millions of dollars to provide security means to community organizations. So all in all, what we've learned is that that role of being a global platform out there, responding to crisis, helping communities, meeting their needs where they are in this current moment, was very critical. And our assumption is that would continue in the next couple of years, as I said, as recovery continues. We also learned that Aliyah never stops. And I should say that even during this very difficult year, we continued to bring Olim to Israel, and we were very surprised that the demand for Aliyah grew dramatically. Hundreds of percents of increase in opening Aliyah files from all across the world. 170% increase from North America, 150% from France, 120% from Latin America. What we've seen is that many people actually wanted to make that decision, even though all the difficulties that the pandemic entailed. And what we have done is we have worked with the government, with the Ministry of Aliyah and Absorption, and with the Authority of Immigration to make sure that we're able to continue to bring Olim while providing quarantine arrangements, while providing stipends and supports because the job market is a very tough one, while assisting Olim that come from risk communities like Ethiopia. And so we have ended 2020 under this very difficult conditions with more than 21,000 Olim, which is really incredible. And we continue to see the rise already in the beginning of 2021 and anticipate that to be the case. As part of that, I would mention specifically to Israel, the special operation we've been carrying out in the last 3 months to bring 2,000 Olim from Ethiopia, from among the remaining in Gondar and Addis. This is a very moving, I would say, endeavor of family reunification, bringing in people who've been teared apart from their relatives and families from more than 10 and 15 years, living in very dire conditions, even prior to the pandemic, let alone after the pandemic had broke, along with some very unstable security situation in Ethiopia. So this is really not only a rescue operation, but also a reunification with their families. And in a very expedited process, in the last 3 months, we have brought them even under all the lockdowns and the closure of Ben Gurion. And I'm proud and happy to say that within a week's time, we'll have the last flight coming in, bringing another 300 Olim to complete this first stage of Tzur Israel of bringing 2,000 Olim from Ethiopia to Israel. What we've also learned is that Jews continue to connect to Israel, but differently. So we were very concerned whether we will be able to continue the work we do in Israel Experiences, where in a regular year, we bring tens of thousands of young Jews to Israel to experience Israel, mainly through our MERCAZ program, which is our flagship endeavor in this area, bringing 12,000 young Jews for periods between a semester to a year, among which I think your communities very much are involved and know, because you send your graduates of your youth movements and your communities also to Israel. But as well as all our work in the partnership world, we have a whole range of partnerships between communities in the world and cities and towns in Israel, which are very much basing their activities around exchanges and missions. And you can imagine all of that had to be shut down because of travel limitations. And so what we've learned is that we had to create some different opportunities to engage and to stay together and to be connected through the virtual sphere. And we've done that in many, many ways. But what was a very great surprise to us is actually that the demand among young Jews to come and spend time in Israel, even though the situation was very high. And so our MERCAZ program was the only Israel Experience program that was able to attain from the government an approval of an entry visa to Israel. And after committing to the different quarantine arrangements and taking responsibility to make sure we will obey with all the restrictions, We were actually able to bring to Israel this year more than 8,000 young Jews that came to the different MERCAZ programs. We've even been able to have the Ministry of Health approve us to vaccinate all the MERCAZ participants. And so more than 80% of them currently are already vaccinated. And aside from the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, which we had, we've not been able to let them in. The minute Ben Gurion was closed also for Israeli citizens. Hopefully we'll be able to renew their entry to Israel very soon. And we have more than 1,000 that we know are waiting to come in very eagerly in the next couple of weeks. What we also learned about the population at risk we work in Israel with is that their needs became even bigger. They were the most vulnerable before, and therefore we had to address their needs in a very intensive way this year. And we have provided them both with support and stipends and assistance. And we understand that this would continue to be a major part of what we do also during the next 2 years until economic situation is better. We're working in the Israeli society not only with our direct populations, but I would say that at any given moment when there are crises, such as in the case in the past, whether it's operations around the Gaza area or whether it's the Second Lebanon War and others, we always try to see where is it that we can help in a more broader way the Israeli society. And so also during the pandemic, we were part of many national efforts, whether it's of volunteerism, helping NGOs and small businesses, etc. And so we continue to see, again, as we say, on behalf of World Jewry, being involved in the more weaker areas of the Israeli society, and that has been the case also in the last year. And lastly, I would say we understood that many of the things that has happened this year, we will probably have to adapt into some different mode of operation also into the future. So this is not something that will disappear tomorrow morning. And even when limitations of travel hopefully would be out and we can go back to some kind of the more traditional way, there are many things that we learned from this year that could become an opportunity. And I'll give just one example. We have a huge operation of summer camps in former Soviet Union, which provide kind of a gateway to Jewish life, a Jewish identity for many youth and their families in the former Soviet Union. This has been a flagship endeavor of ours for more than 30 years. And we see then that becomes a pipeline, both for Aliyah and for committed Jewish community life in the former Soviet Union. This year was the first time we could not hold those camps, just as a lot of you have experienced in your own communities. And so we have transformed them to be online. And so not only that we were successful to operate those and have thousands of participants, what was more interesting to us is that 30% of the participants came from places which we've never been able to bring participants from because we weren't able to be there physically. And so that was an example for us where the virtual and the digital sphere actually enables us to expand our reach and to engage and involve populations which we were never able to do before. And so these are the parts that we would like to also make sure continue as an opportunity as we move forward. And again, there are many more examples which I'm sure you know from your own communities. I want to end very shortly and then open for question and say, so where does all of this send us when we think about 2021 and our priorities? So I remind us, we started our way by identifying those 3 focus areas of our work in the next couple of years, focusing on Aliyah, focusing on connecting Jews to Israel and to one another, and to continue to influence the Israeli society. And then had this learning in the last year, understanding that we have to adopt some of the things moving forward. And so as we look at 2021 to the focus of the work of this organization, I will try to very briefly share those top priorities under those 3 impact areas. That's not reflecting all of what we do, but that definitely reflects our priorities. So under Aliyah, what we see in 2021 is that we will continue to address the rise in Aliyah, where we anticipate the focus to be on boosting Aliyah among young professionals and young families. We're seeing more than 40% increase of demand for aliyah among people in the ages of 18 to 40, which means young professionals and young families from all across the world. And so creating more and more opportunities of professional integration programs that enables people to more easily translate their professions and move their careers and the work opportunities could definitely serve as an incentive for them to make the decision. I'll give you just one example. In the last year, more than 1,000 out of the 21,000 Olim that came, more than 1,000 came as doctors or part of medical teams and joined the whole medical system in Israel, which had very dire need for that workforce to join. And so we're looking into the different areas where we can address the rise in Aliyah through this demand of younger Olim from all across the world, as well as I said, a focus of reuniting Ethiopian families in Israel with the Tzur Israel and hopefully additional government decisions that we hope would be taken once the new government is formed. In areas of connecting Jews worldwide, we assume that our work as a global platform addressing the needs of communities during recovery period, whether it's through the work of our shlichim on the ground, the J-Ready Resource Center for Social Resilience, or the work of our security fund would continue. We want to continue to reimagine immersive experiences in Israel, tapping on this great success of this year, of forming different blended models, such as the one we've created this year, which enabled MERCAZ to have this big success, enable more young Jews to come to experience Israel while maintaining their work from a distance or their study from a distance, and some other opportunities that we have developed, as well as continue to develop blended models for peoplehood engagement, such as the one I told you about, the camps in former Soviet Union. So how do we make advantage of what we've learned to create more opportunities for people from wider range to continue to engage with one another, even if it's not only physical. And lastly, in that area, we have been expanding in the last couple of years our work in the Israeli society around peoplehood education, seeding the notion and the knowledge and appreciation among Israelis to Jewish life outside of Israel and to their brothers and sisters in Jewish communities. We know this is an area that requires a lot of work. We're doing that work partially with the streams, such as the conservative movement, along with the other streams in Israel, but also in a huge endeavor we have with the Ministry of Education, trying to bring the knowledge about the Jewish people, and about the different facets and opportunities of Jewish life into the realm of the educational system of Israel. So that would continue as well this year as a focus area. And lastly, in the Israeli society, along with continuing to support Israeli society coping with COVID implications, as I said, mostly with the populations at risk, our focus, what we want to focus on is really continue to expand our work among the gap years in the Israeli society, where we're working with thousands of young Israelis in their gap year and post-army in different educational programs, such as service year and pre-army academies, where our focus is working from those who come from among the more peripheral communities, and make sure that they're able to kind of strengthen and change their future course of their life as well as their communities. And I think with that, I'll stop at this point, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Amira, okay, great. Neely, please guide us with the questions.
Emily, you raised your hand? Okay. Mario, yeah.
Since nobody asks, I make a question. We here in Brazil encountered a very special problem, that was that the WZO, or at least the Brazilian Zionist organization, doesn't exist, or exists in a very slow form. And we asked the support of the Shlichim, of the Shliach from the Jewish agency to help us. And we got a no answer, an answer as no. And that's the first question I would propose. And the second question is worldwide, the definition of who is a Jew. It's different in the WZO and at the Jewish agency. And why is that?
So for the first questions, I'm not sure I'm aware of the specific program you're mentioning. And so I'd be happy to take this offline and get more details, understanding what program you talk about, what shaliach we're talking about, what kind of attempt was made, what kind of an answer was given. That's something I think requires more attention. And so I'd be happy to take it offline. And you can email me. I'd be happy to address that.
Okay.
In terms of who is a Jew, I'm not sure, the Jewish agency does not define who is a Jew. We work with Jews from all across. We are obligated in terms of requirements for Aliyah, we are obligated to obey with the government definition, which is required in order to define an eligibility for Aliyah. So in terms of our programming all across the world, we do not differentiate, and we work with all the communities and anyone who find a relevant way of expressing their Judaism. Also in the different people we bring for Israel experiences or the work that we do in communities. The only way where this plays a part is for the purpose of Aliyah, and there we are obliged to perform those decisions as an outcome of the government policy.
And why WZO doesn't oblige at the same line?
In what sense WZO do not oblige?
At the last election, Vada Poel, you didn't need to prove you was a Jew. You only have to check a box on the formula, and that was enough. Here in Brazil specifically, we had almost 33% of evangelic and other kind of people who voted or wanted to vote at the Vada Poel. And we asked the Jewish agency to look at this list and say who is and who isn't Jewish, and we got again a no.
So maybe Ishaq would want to address the issue of who is eligible or not to vote for the WZO. He's an expert on that, definitely more than me. I can say again, in terms of the Jewish agency, our mandate to define anyone becoming from a Jewish community or not is only for the purpose of Aliyah. And so I do not know about us being any honest broker in defining anyone as a Jew or not Jew for any other purpose other than Aliyah. So Izar, if you want to elaborate on that, I'd be happy.
So indeed, in Latin America specifically, and in Brazil specifically, we had a challenge in the last round of elections with right-wing organizations that brought in evangelicals to check and sign in and wanted to vote. We were able to stop it, but Amira is right, because there is a reason why it's two systems. Jewish agencies working with Aliyah, and the eligibility for making Aliyah is one thing, while the flexibility of the WZO protocol with regard to who is a Jew, basically at least at this stage, says that once you declare that you are a Jew, we understand and we respect your declaration. Obviously, it was used for the wrong reasons this time in Brazil, and we need to see towards the next Congress how we address it in the best way. It's not a simple way, because once you have a defined decision who is a Jew, you put some Jews that are considered Jews, not necessarily in the same place, and it might get us into some challenges even within the three streams that we know in Judaism and respect. So when non-Jews are trying to get into our WZO system, it is a challenge that we are working now legally to find a resolution that would help us to deal with it in the next round. Indeed, Mario, a big, big challenge.
Okay, at least that's to correct in 5 years. We have some time to correct it. But the problem here is how the Shaliach can help us to rebuild the Brazilian Zionist organization, because we think, at least, that we are competitors, and we shouldn't be competitors. We should.
So Mario, on your second part, I'm really interested to hear more and understand where is it that we can help enhance the work of the Shaliach with your Jewish communities. And so please, I will make sure Lior, my assistant who is on this call, would attain your email address, and let's communicate on that offline.
Okay, later on. Okay.
Sandra.
Yes, hi. Hi, Amira, and thank you for your presentation. My name is Sandra Nasiewicz-Bear, and I'm located in Berlin. I'm the coordinator of the Zacharias Frankel College, that's a Masorti Rabbinical Seminary in Europe. And I would like you to explore or to elaborate a little bit more on the activities of the Jewish Agency in the Emirates as the newest. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. So, so first of all, I'd be happy later on we can share with you a video that we prepared and shared with our Board of Governors, which I think gives the taste in a more authentic way than I would do. But I would say that what's really special about the Jewish community in the Emirates is that this is a community of mostly expats, so they're not any original kind of historical Jewish life there. But it means that the community is actually comprised of Jews from all across the world. So you have there Jews from Europe and from North America and from South Africa and from Australia, which for each of them, for their own personal reasons, found themselves moving, relocating their life to the Emirates. While on one hand, wanting to continue to express their Jewish life, just like they did in their original countries, but then arrived in a place where they couldn't do that in a public way. And so imagine a person, moving to the Emirates, and then Passover comes in and they want to conduct a Seder Pesach, or, and be able to purchase kosher meat, or have their kids, get Jewish education or Jewish values, or light Hanukkah candles, all of those things that are really kind of trivial to us, that a Jew almost anywhere in the world could just wake up and decide to do, they were not able. And then what the Abraham Accords enabled is actually to take this Jewish life from under the cover out into the public. And so that is what's really amazing and exciting about what happens there. The estimation currently is that there are more than 1,000 Jews in the Emirates. And they're already forming their formal kind of organizational structure of a community. And like any good Jewish community, there's already a few communities that and it's really it's amazing to see. I've had the opportunity to even be there and visit them and visit all of them, and they're now actually for the first time ever are able to start to have Jewish weddings there, and to have celebrate the holidays. They've celebrated Hanukkah and Tu B'Shvat and now Purim, and are also they're forming their first school ever. So it's actually about that. It's about first and foremost, it's about the opportunity to, assume the way of life that you want to live in a way which is public and legal. I think the second part of the opportunity is that the Emirates is the center whereby in regular times where it's not, under pandemic social distancing regulations, you have hundreds of thousands. It's a very busy business center of the world. And so you have hundreds of thousands of people who are coming to conventions. And it just happened that a portion of them are Jews that are coming from all across the world. And so now when there is an ability for public Jewish life there, they would be able to, to attain Jewish services, whether it's attend a synagogue or whether if they happen to be there on a holiday or on Shabbat and they want to, make sure to observe Shabbat, etc. And so now they will have an opportunity, but it also creates an opportunity for kind of a peoplehood, a global Jewish peoplehood encounter, where people could meet one another and be able to kind of, connect in a way that you would do in other countries, but that wasn't available there. And lastly, I would say that the kind of vibe or I would say promise that the Abraham Accords brought is also one that could create a different model of a conversation between Jews and Muslims in that specific country. And so that could also maybe serve as a model for a broader conversation about Jews and Muslims relations all across the world, not only in the Emirates, but maybe from there, different, more, open and pluralistic models could emerge. And so we already see an interest that is very much kind of taking place among some of the younger cohorts of local Emirates, with the local Jewish kind of leaders, along with Israelis and from Jews from all over the world. And so it's an interesting evolution to see how could that evolve to then become an example for some different models, more tolerated models around that. Lastly, I would say that when you think about, what's the trajectory of such a community as you look into the future? In many ways, this could come to be a very growing community, both because of tourism from Israelis that would come. And then if they continue to come at the scale that they come now, probably more business opportunities would be created. And so you would have, on one hand, more people who would permanently live there, but also more people who would come for shorter periods. And again, that all will create demand for Jewish services and Jewish settings while people are there, as well as tourists that come from other Jewish communities from across the world. So we're now at very early stages of trying to analyze what all of that would mean. We already have a shaliach there on the ground who's working with all the different segments of the community. We're going to embark on a first demographic study to understand better who are those people who are there, how long they've been there, what's their plans moving forward, what are their kind of desires and dreams and needs, and where is it that we can help them, become a community like any other Jewish community, which is connected to Israel, which is connected to the global wider Jewish family, where Jewish life could thrive and become kind of an anchor from Jews from across the world who would come there.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Emily.
Hi, we don't know each other. I'm Emily Levy-Shochat. I'm here in Israel, and I'm on the MERCAZ Olami board, and I'm one of our representatives. I'm one of the Skanim at Kakal.
Mm-hmm.
And in that light, I have lots of questions, but I think I won't go into them here. I'd like to come meet you someday and talk with you about that. A number of things, but I am wondering about the budget and your budget in general. What was the impact of Corona? I mean, I would assume there is an impact. And also within that, our movement and the reform movement have always, there's a monetary connection. What about the budgets to the Zramim, to the movements? Because that in turn has an impact on all the people sitting around the table.
So first of all, nice to meet you, Emily, and I'd be really happy for us to have a real coffee and meet not via screens.
I'm with you.
Most invited to
Thank you.
have my office schedule for us. We can have a longer conversation. I'd say with regard to the budget, so I think like many other non-for-profit organizations, not just in the Jewish world, but also in the Jewish world, we have suffered from a major income crisis because of the situation. Because communities had to shift some of their priorities and attend their own critical needs, mostly welfare and providing services to the most vulnerable. And so shifting of priorities influenced. As well as the economic crisis, which created more, I would say, conservative acts on behalf of some of the donors, which had to be more careful with their philanthropic giving. And at the same time, I should say we did have an amazing success being able to fundraise for emergency needs, but that meant that money flew, but to some other needs of our own. So, providing services and protectiveness to all of those populations that I talked about. So all in all, what has happened to us in that sense is that during the middle of 2020, we had to take a very severe decision about downsizing the organization and cutting $25 million. To the ones who do not know our budgetary realm, I would say that what we are experiencing in the last 2 decades is a decrease in what we call our unrestricted funding, our support that comes from our traditional supporters and owners, I would say, Keren Hayesod and the Jewish Federations in North America. And so that unrestricted funding has gone down in the last 2 decades quite dramatically. We've been able to replace and compensate some of that by bringing in more targeted and designated funding to specific projects, whether it's from partners, private donors, foundations, the government, but not in a way that replaced that unrestricted funding. And so the decision we had to take, what was called internally at the board as Tier 1, was a very severe cut of $25 million, where in that part, we had to also cut some of our budget to the streams, as well as to some other very important projects of ours. What we have been able to do, though, and that I'm very happy about, is that at the same time, we were preparing for an even more severe decrease. And so we had kind of a doomsday Tier 2 plan that if unfortunately we had to go towards implementing, we would have to implement an additional cut, also in the streams and in some other areas. And I'm happy to say that we were able to bypass and prevent that. And so in this Board of Governors, we've approved the 2021 budget that does not include an additional cut. Not in the
But nor does it include a growth. It doesn't in any way.
It could, yeah, unfortunately, it could not.
So we all know where we stand.
Include a growth currently. It could not include a growth because our income base did not increase. Our income base, just like we should say, also after the 2008 economic crisis, where there was a severe downgrade, the market doesn't correct itself in kind of an automatic way. And anyway, in this current situation, we're still in the midst of it. So we're not post it. And as I said, recovery would take time.
Yeah.
But I do hope we are looking into some opportunities of continuing to strengthen our work with the streams, also in the connection we have with the WZO and Kakal, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the near future. I can tell you, I can really, in an honest way, say that our current leadership, both myself and our chairman, Mr. Herzog, and the rest of the leadership has huge appreciation to the work we're doing with the streams in Israel. We do not see it only as an allocation to X amount of projects or Y amount of projects. We see that as an investment in really changing the nature of the Israeli society. And so when we do some other work of ours around peoplehood for Israelis, whether it's with the school system in the Ministry of Education, whether it's through our work in partnerships, whether it's through some work we're now doing with the Ministry of Culture, to everything is being done to promote the notion of a pluralistic opportunity of Jewish life in Israel. And the streams are a major strategic partner of ours. And And I also think we may have some opportunities. We've had conversations in the past with Izhar and Gilad and some other partners. And I think this is actually the right time to go back to those and see, the philanthropic trends that are taking place would probably continue. The fact that the world moves into more targeting way of funding rather than unrestricted is a fact. But I belong to the ones who believe that there are great stories to be told about the influence of the work of the streams on the Israeli society, on creating a much more just society, a much more equal and open society. And therefore, I think could become for a compelling case to engage partners around targeted giving for those. And so I would urge us to invest the time in that, not only in trying to go back to historical kind of formulas, but rather at the same time work on how do we create those new opportunities of targeted funding together to this important work of the streams.
Great, I appreciate that. And, so now we're up to 2 coffees, that's for sure. And we'll invite Mauricio and Izhar and Rakefet from the Israel movement, and Chani, for instance, who's sitting here, who is the director of our Noam internationally. I mean, there is a lot, and I know, and I appreciate, I'm a former chair of the Israel movement, so I certainly know what's gone on with the Jewish agency, and it's clear in your attitude is certainly so open and is inviting, and we understand reality. We also, so great. Let's, we'll follow
Emily,
up.
we wanted to thank you for the monies that you from Kakal allocated to the Jewish Agency this year. The 15 million shekels are very much appreciated. Toda.
Anytime I can. Mauricio and I, right, whatever. Okay.
As we are closing now this part of the meeting, I want to thank to Amira. I hear all your presentation from my car. I come from the north, from Nihuma, Belim. Was a very difficult traffic today, and I invite all of our branches to check how increase the partnership with the local activities of the Jewish Agency that is so important for us. And we know that we will work together and more projects with the Jewish Agency and with MERCAZ Olami and MERCAZ Olami. Thank you very much. Thank you to Izhar for the opening the evening, and thank you to Nili for organizing this meeting. Thank you to all of you that participate in this activity, in this very important presentation of Amira. And Nili, we have another point in the agenda today.
So I'm just going to apologize and thank you all and leave you to do your own business. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Rabbi Jennifer, over the past few months, I know that MERCAZ USA, MERCAZ Canada, and MERCAZ England, UK have collaborated for Tu B'Shvat, for Purim, and I know, and also a book club. So I was just hoping that you can share with us in a few sentences how it was, trying to encourage everyone else also to find to create such collaborations in Latin America or in Europe. So Jennifer, you have the stage. Rabbi Jennifer.
If I miss something, Sarah is on the call also, and she can jump in. So in reality, Sarah Crane and I have been working together for a long time, because whenever we get something in one person's newsletter, we've been lifting it, and using it for the other newsletter. And we started sharing, early on. And as soon as Sarah came into the position. And we started talking regularly, and that led to some programming, because as we moved on to virtual programming and we wanted to increase the knowledge base of people to say, oh, I know what MERCAZ is, we decided we could do twice as much work if we had, and reach twice as many people if we had more people working together. And so if we already had something going on. So Sari already had the book club going on. She was starting that. I think I came in at the beginning, but after she'd been working on it for 6 months. So by the first program. And the book club is, we read a book by an Israeli author. We have a couple of months to read it. We put it out in our newsletters, and then we have a discussion of it online. And in between, we have a Facebook group. You can go to MERCAZ Reads Israel and check out if there's any conversation. I think actually this third book, which we had to recently postpone because of a number of different issues, but partly Sari's husband, Jonathan, broke his ankle. So we're wishing him a refuah shlema. There's finally conversation going on the Facebook group. So it's not like it happened overnight. We've been doing this since Sari, when did we do the first book club? Can't remember now.
We did our first with Abigail Gratz last spring. And then we did the second one with Ilana Kirshen in September. Right. So we did one last spring, and then we did one in September.
Right. We were supposed to have the third one this month or February, and it got put off, and we'll do it again. But we're going to do 2 or 3 a year is our goal. We did a Tu B'Shvat program. Sari and I started talking. Sari said, let's see if we can get Matt in on this, and so we worked with the Cantors Assembly. One of the things we've been working on, and this is where I'm going to say this about Tu B'Shvat and with Purim. Rather than trying to do the work all by ourselves, we have such an amazing movement filled with talented people, and we each took on a small piece. We got together, we planned something out. We said, okay, what can you bring to the table? What can I bring to the table? And we each did a small piece, and then we got together using Zoom and having people participate from Israel, from England, from Canada, and from the United States. And Sari, God bless her, has been the host for these events through MERCAZ USA. And the same with Purim. We had Women's League and we had Men's Club, and we asked for videos. We got videos from Israel, we got videos from Australia, we got videos from the Seminario in Argentina. I'm missing something. Oh, Uganda, and this becomes the basis for a program, and it's only an hour long. We really try and stick to just an hour. We know people are zoomed out, but by just asking someone to give us 15 minutes or less, we've been able to put on these programs, and we're getting really good feedback. And that means that people see the MERCAZ logo, they hear the MERCAZ name, and we get more exposure that way. And we can share it. And everything's recorded, so if someone wants to use it later for a program, then they can use it later. That's about it.
I just want to add one thing, that we're getting even more of a bang, particularly from MERCAZ Reads, because we've made it available, and we've told United Synagogue and the Rabbinical Assembly that it's available for any kehillah that wants to use it, even if they didn't participate with us. And we're not charging. The only thing we're asking for is that they acknowledge that it came from MERCAZ, because what we're trying to do is to build on what we were able to do through the elections, that we now have a much bigger email list. We have 18,000 names on MERCAZ USA email list. We've never had that before. So we're not really soliciting them, but we are sending them information about programs and trying to keep them up to date on what's going on. And by being able to offer something, we're doing better, and we're getting positive feedback. So the hope is that 4 years from now, when may the Kaddish Baruch Hu help us, we're going to be back in elections, that we will have some name recognition. So we're looking for things to do. We're grossly understaffed, and by pooling our resources, we can really do more. And the truth is, we like working with each other. I love working with Jen, and working with Matt and with Martha was terrific. And I think we've all become friends. So it's been very wonderful. And Neely's been helpful. And whenever we've asked for help from MERCAZ Olami. We've gotten it. So we only have good things to say about this.
Yeah,
It's been great.
amazing that way.
So first of all, thank you guys. Thank you for both of you, and also Matt, who wasn't available to join us. And I loved watching from the side, and that's why it was important for me to share with everyone else here, because also, just like Amira said, being on Zoom all day can suck, pardon my French, but it really gives us a lot of opportunities to collaborate and overcome the boundaries, like the physical boundaries, the fact that everyone is in a different country. So we can really do great things. So again, thank you. And I encourage everyone else to also think and see how we can collaborate together. I'm obviously here for any question, any, brainstorming, Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever. And that's it. And I think we're going to say good night or good day to everyone. And we'll see you soon, here or there.
Shabbat shalom to everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom, thank you.
Laila tov.
Shabbat shalom.
Here, everybody.
Ahronoviz, who is the executive director of the